as you grow, you will necessarily, as a founder, like step away, let's say, from operations and delegate more. But it's still very important to check in with the team in store weekly and like just have like chats with people, even if it's like 10, 15 minutes. It makes a whole like difference.
Julia, welcome to the Seat of the Muse podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so happy that you're here. There's so much to unpack today. So you are the founder of Elevate, London's first science-backed functional smoothie bar in the city of London. You've obviously like captured everyone's, attention and love with your first opening in the Royal Exchange, and then just very recently, and huge congrats, in Selfridges. So we're going to unpack all of this, but obviously before being the founder of Elevate, you were just a finance girl working in investment banking, private equity, you're the right track. So I want to start maybe a bit there. And for our listeners, have them know and discover who it was, Julia, before being the founder of Elevate and how your life looked like.
Amazing. What an introduction. So yeah, I started my career in investment banking. I went to business school in France, and then after I graduated, I moved to London to start working in IB in London. And then after that, after being promoted to associate, I decided to, let's say follow the classic route of like moving to private equity. So yeah, I don't know if you want to dive in like specific areas or, kind of like understand what was the reasoning behind like each of the moves.
Yeah, I think maybe, once after those few years you've reached private equity, which is kind of where people want to get to, when they start
Yep.
an IB. But what was happening there and how did you feel that made you, I guess, want to leave?
Yeah, so I think that maybe to answer that question, like I should actually start by telling you why I wanted to join private equity and like what was the process. So investment banking was, I think something I've picked out of uni because I think it was very prestigious. I liked everything, so I wanted to stay like generalist in a way. And I thought that IB was the perfect way to go because you learn so much. Then after that, you can potentially do anything that you like. It's like a great school. You learn so much about like relationship management, working under pressure, all of this, which is very important to succeed in other careers, but also in entrepreneurship. So yeah, I was in investment banking, promoted to associate. And while I could have stayed in investment banking and do my whole career there, I was much more interested by the kind of like business side of things, like entrepreneurships and really understanding the fundamentals of a business, what makes a good business. And I think like I always knew I wanted to do something for myself. So for me, going to private equity was like the right way to get like closer to businesses and follow them in a longer period of time. Because investment banking, you work on a project for a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months, depending on the nature of the project. But then you kind of like move on to the next and there is no ownership. So you don't go as deep as you would do with private equity. So that was like my reasoning for going into private equity. And I was absolutely passionate about the consumer sector. So that's why I picked to work like closely to consumer companies. I've also done like angel investing on the side, like, so obviously much smaller like companies and ticket that we would do in private equity. But to me, it was like a great way to, understand the consumer sector better and like get closer to entrepreneurship. I think that, at the time I was still like relatively early in my career. I was still repaying my student loan. I had no specific idea of like what I wanted to do. So staying in private equity and being there like was what made the most sense for me at the time because, I was quite risk averse. And it's when you're launching your own company, you put everything you have on the line. So that's why for me, I felt more comfortable doing a couple of years in investment banking than private equity to feel that I reached a stage of my career where, if tomorrow I wanted to go back, I could still do it because I have enough experience under my belt. And now entrepreneurship is something like almost as of course, I will never go back, but you know what I mean? Like that could, if I wanted, I could. And yeah, you never know. Like maybe I'll come back as a partner. Who knows? But yeah, I think that was like the whole logic behind the process and why I did what I did before going into entrepreneurship. And I think for me, it was really important to wait to have like the right idea to start something of my own.
Yeah. I love that you say that you're risk averse because obviously being a founder is maybe like the riskiest thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because as you say, you put everything on the line, you're on your own, you're building that. And so what happened, I guess, that made you want to go there? Because also, if I understand, it's not like you've had this like wellness, aspect in your life all the time that kind of puts you into that direction.
Exactly. And I think, it came from a place where when you have nothing to lose, why not try? And I really hit like a lowest point like in my life, especially when it comes to like mental and physical wellness, because I was working very long hours. I was completely burned out, not taking care of myself. So, like skipping meals, not exercising, going on a maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep like every night. So I wasn't doing anything like to kind of like take care of myself until it reached a point where I had to change something because I started to have health issues and the doctors were like really clear of telling me, okay, either you take a break from work or now you try to, integrate wellness into your life. But at this stage, it was not even like integrating wellness or doing the extra mile. It was just like behaving like a normal
Yeah.
person in the
Yeah.
sense that, you need to have breakfast, you need to have lunch, you
Enough
can't eat like exactly. So for me, really came from that place where I was like, okay, right now I'm feeling really low. Let me try to, incorporate wellness so I just can get better like physically and mentally. And so this is actually when I started to think, okay, I'm gonna exercise in the morning. Then I want to have breakfast or something after I went to the gym on my way to the office. I couldn't find any nice like protein shakes or like smoothie breakfast because I'm not really a English breakfast type of person. And yeah, I wasn't super satisfied by the options out there that were available on the go. So that's how I kind of like started to think this is so weird that in London, we have so many great places for like salads, for example, or like coffee. But there is nothing when it comes to like functional beverages. And, this doesn't make sense given like where the supplement and like wellness market is growing as a whole. And, I'm sure you take supplements at home like every morning and like pretty much the majority of people do now, but there was nothing available outside of home. So this is when I started to think this is really interesting because I think, there is something that can be done. And this is when I started to look into the problem, got obsessed with it, and, decided ultimately, okay, this is my sign to start
Yeah.
something.
Amazing. So you found kind of a gap in the market and you wanted to answer your own problem, basically.
Yeah, that was a completely selfish move. So
I mean,
yeah.
that's fine because I'm sure you served well for many, many other people at the same time. And so obviously, I've seen your TikToks, you've built in public what you've built. And so there was a lot of already built up before you even open your doors. When you opened, you had already like 10K followers on TikTok. Was it an intentional strategy to build in public or did it kind of help you in the process of building because you were also new to it?
I think it was both, in the sense that I was, coming from my background of like private equity investment banking, they ask you to be very private on socials and like everything super confidential. So it's not like I was, already like putting content out there for like the public. And I think that for me, I've seen like many successful brands like building in public, like saying that it was what was working for a lot of people and especially for physical spaces. But that was also a way for me to, put it in the world and say, okay, I'm committed to doing this. So I cannot like back down now.
Yeah.
It's like too late. I've said I would do it. So I have to do it. So I think that for me was also a way to like keep myself like accountable. But I didn't expect it to grow the way it grew. And it was like amazing because then, when you have tough days and it's gonna sound cliche, but just having like also strangers like cheering for you and telling you keep going, this is great. This actually helps quite a lot. So I think it was definitely like the right move, and for anyone like building a new product or thinking about doing something and not even like doing it yet, I would say like build in public. Like it's extremely tough, but if you do this well, you will definitely like benefit from it.
No, I fully agree. For even for my podcast, I wanted to kind of build it in public in the sense where I take people behind the scenes when I get ready for an episode, how I prepare, etc. started it a bit, but then I just couldn't do it. I don't know why. It's not the fact that, I don't like to be in front of a camera, even if it was at the start, but it takes a lot of time, like more than people even realize. It's not just really holding the phone and walking around, there's a lot more to do.
No, for sure. And this is something I've actually realized is like, content creation is a proper full-time job. And I'm always like super admirative of like founders that manage to post like very consistently because I'm really bad at posting consistently. Like, maybe there's a week where I don't have like, I was about to say I don't have so much work, but it's actually no. It's just I have more time. Maybe I have like an extra hour to spare. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna post a video, but it takes a lot of time to edit and everything. So that's definitely something that is very time consuming, and like content creation when done well is really a proper full-time job. So.
No, 100%. And so before we dive into the building of Elevate, there's actually one point I want to touch on because I feel like it often doesn't, it's not really talked about. When you move from finance to being your own founder yourself, there's something that changes in your identity as well. There's a lot of prestige in going up to people, when you're in social circles, being like, I work in private equity. There's not really much follow-up questions there. But if you're like, oh, I'm building a smoothie bar, you're looked differently. How did you navigate that and you're reshifting, your narrative for yourself?
It was really hard. Honestly, especially when, I decided to leave private equity and, people are like, oh, are you leaving to go to another fund? Like, what's next? Or are you transferring to a hedge fund or something? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm going to build a smoothie bar. Like reaction of people is more like, are you okay? So that's why it was really tough at the beginning, especially when, the company didn't exist at the time. You're the only one having the vision in your head. And like people just hear like smoothie bar. For sure, it was, I think, a bit surprising for a lot of people. I think it took a lot of time for me to also, like be fine with it and for my ego to accept it and to stop introducing myself when people were saying, hey, like, what are you doing? And I used to say, oh, I used to work in private equity and now I've left my job to, like start a functional smoothie bar. And I did that for a very long time as if, my value was attached to like me working in private equity. I think that from the moment I realized that I was not defined by my job and, I was much more than this. And even if I were defined by my job, it was fine to be just like the owner of like a smoothie bar. There's something really like freeing about that, but it definitely took a long time. But now I'm like completely fine with it. And, sometimes like when people ask me what I do, I sometimes joke like, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a barista or so now I'm kind of like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah, no, but I totally can relate to that, when you feel like your identity is tied to the industry you're in. But I think you should be extremely proud of just being able to say, I am the founder of Elevate, given how Elevate in not even a year is now, in 2 places and like super iconic, and you're growing so fast, which is amazing to see. So if we go back to, Elevate and how you build that. So what are the first things you kind of did? Obviously, I want to talk about the fundraising part, but maybe first, like, okay, when you had the idea, you did your research. What is the first things you thought through?
So I think that, I started applying my kind of like private equity method, like looking at like the market. And then, you go from like the broader picture to the kind of like finer details when it comes to like the company. So I definitely like, had a look at like the competitive market in London to identify like, if there was a gap, to see if also potentially other players like started to move into wellness, because that's always like a good indicator. If no one is doing it or thinking of doing it, sometimes it's just mean that it's not a great idea. So that's why you want to look for like the signals saying, okay, the market is shifting in that direction. So this is the first thing I've done. Then it was more about like assessing feasibility of the project, like the cost, how much it would cost to build. And, what was the kind of like big roadmap to build Elevate. I think that, assessing the cost was maybe like the hardest part because, when you have no idea and you've never done that in your life, I don't have like contacts for like contractors, and everything is also very variable on like the space that you pick. Like, so for me, it was a bit like an unknown part. And so I decided to go with, the idea of like, okay, raise more than you actually need to. because for sure it's gonna end up costing more. And this is like some advice that I got from, a lot of like founders or investors that I spoke with. They were like, listen, I think if this is the number you think you need, then just add like 30% on top of that and just like raise more, which, I did. I ended up like raising more and having like an oversubscribed round, which, now in hindsight, I'm really grateful that we did, because then it allowed us to have a bit of like a buffer. And I think thanks to that, I didn't have to have any like worries in terms of like, oh, am I gonna go through all the cash, and are we gonna be able to pay salaries by the end of the month? But then when it comes to like more like the operations itself, like on how to build that, I think that, before even fundraising, I try to identify the reasons why investors would not invest in me. And I think that for that, obviously, my investment background was very helpful. And I think that the first one I've seen was like, okay, I'm a solo founder with no experience whatsoever in operations. So I tried to, see if I could find any like co-founder, maybe on the operational side of things. Couldn't find anyone. And honestly, I think finding a co-founder is like marriage. Like, you need to find a partner that is here for like the long term. And, I think it's better to be alone than with someone that you're kind of like unsure of. So I decided to kind of like leave that thought aside. I know a lot of investors have declined investing, saying, oh, I don't invest in solo founders. Fine. Like that's whatever you prefer. But I would say that the way I decided to act upon that was to learn the operations myself, by going to work as a barista in a juice bar. So I did that for 2 months, and it was great, to see how the environment operates, and like, how staffing is done, for example. Like what are the pain points as like someone that is working as a barista? Like where, what can you do to make the work life also better for like the people that work for you? So yeah, I think that was like the best thing I could have done. And honestly, like it was very tough to again go back from, go from private equity and then become like a barista, paid like less than the minimum wage, because I was like on a trainee position.
Wow.
So I was also very scared of like bumping into someone I know from
Can you
work, being like, what the fuck are you doing here? You know what I mean? And it happened. But
Wow. Okay.
I think that, these were basically like the main steps that I took before actually starting like the fundraise.
Okay, that's so amazing. Not a lot of people would think the same way as you and try to understand what could make an investor not invest, and then you want to fill that. Is there something actually that in that experience as a barista, you learned that you put into, Elevate, whether it's to make the customer journey more seamless or the way your employees are working?
Yeah, I think that, I've seen how important it is to have like a team that feel like appreciated and valued. So I'm really grateful for the team that I have. Like they've been all amazing. And, I have now the OGs that were here from like the first opening, like helped me also open like the Selfridges store. So I really think that it's definitely very important to be close to the team and also have this kind of like regular like check-ins, trying to understand like, how you can make their life better. Because I think that at the end of the day, if your team is happy, it serves everybody, in the sense that it serves the customer experience. It serves yourself, because then, you have more attendance, like less people being, like sick or missing days of work. And it's just like a nicer atmosphere to work in. And also as someone that has been, I think not always like well treated at work, like obviously a different like industry,
Of course.
with, bosses that were maybe a little like too demanding on certain things, not very grateful for other certain things. I thought I don't want to repeat that. I want people to be happy to come to work. I know it's like a very intense work. I know how it feels to be on your feet like 10, 12 hours a day. And I think, my team also appreciate that I've been working with them behind the bar actually until like, until January. I was still working every day, like picking up shifts. So yeah, I think it's really important to be close to the business, because then you can see very quickly what doesn't work and what works in terms of operation as well. So you can constantly adjust and refine.
No, that makes total sense. It's kind of like joining a company at the bottom of the scale
Exactly.
and growing up. So then you understand exactly every corner of it. So let's talk about the 400K pre-seed that you had. How did you navigate your fundraising journey? Because I'm pretty sure, first of all, it's very hard in of itself, but then being a woman and then raising in the wellness industry, I think that adds layers of difficulty. So how did you go about that, fighting the no's if you've had any and, getting to the ones you currently have?
Yeah, so I think it was really tough. I definitely got like free rejection therapy from that. I don't know if, like this is really something like related to me being a woman. Actually, I didn't really think about that like when approaching people. But it was more about the fact that, obviously I wasn't like an exited founder. I didn't have any like track record. And also you need to keep in mind, I was like literally raising like for an idea on a piece of paper. Which I think adds to the difficulty because it's not like I had like a MVP to present or anything to say, okay, I think like this is how fast we can scale. And it's very different when you're raising for like tech than when you're raising for like a retail consumer product. Especially in, in 2024, like the consumer market was still a bit like, I would say not shaky, but like not like the best year to fundraise, nothing to compare with like 2020 or 21. So I think it was definitely a tougher environment to raise in. I would say in terms of like how I approached that, listen, I started like pitching to family and friends, although I didn't want to kind of like, I was, a bit embarrassed or I didn't want to ask to family and friends any money. In the sense that to me, the relationship I have like with my friends or with my family is more important than getting a check from them. So I never ask anyone that didn't like proactively ask me, oh, if I were to invest, like how, would it be possible? And so I never like directly pitched to my family and friends. It was more like obviously when people ask you, oh, what are you working on? And you tell them that you're raising money. If they're interested, then great. And I had like some former colleagues investing, but I never wanted to kind of like be the annoying friend, like, being like, hey, invest in my company. Like, honestly, like, no, I rather, I chose the route of like, instead like pestering strangers on LinkedIn. So I just reached out to actually over 300 people on LinkedIn doing cold emailing, which again, I got like a lot of no's, people ghosting me, people taking calls and then actually doing 5-6 calls with me, which is like very intense for, a small raise, especially when, you don't have any due diligence document because the company doesn't exist yet. And then like plain like ghosting me or people replying to me, oh, no, it's going to be a failure. Like, honestly, like people are wild on LinkedIn. But, that's, again, like I'm glad I did that because now I have like zero shame, zero embarrassment of asking for things because if you don't ask you don't get. So now that's like definitely my mentality. And I think maybe the only bias that we have as women is that we are a bit more shameful and like embarrassed to ask versus our male counterparts. This is something I've noticed, but I think it's maybe just like a bias that we have in general.
No, that's so crazy to hear because obviously I fully agree on the cold emailing is so important because if you don't ask you won't get. But I'm also in full alignment of not being able to ask for help from the closest people around you who are the first one to cheer for you. There's something about asking strangers which feels easier. I don't know how to explain it. But I mean, I guess those people are like crying now because they didn't invest. So
I don't know. I haven't asked them.
And so if I'm not wrong, I kind of read somewhere that you're backed by some, former execs from Joe and the Juice, Atis, Erewhon itself. Can you kind of talk a bit about that and maybe what do they bring to the table to you aside from the, financial aspect?
So before also, because I know how it is to raise money and I know as an investor, the things that would kind of like make me want to invest as well. And I wouldn't say it doesn't mean anything because it's easy to put like someone's picture on the deck, but usually it's easier to get like an intro call, at least if you can say, oh, I'm backed by this person from this industry because this person has experience. And if they decided to associate with you and back you, then it's kind of like a badge of like credibility that you can use to at least, have some calls. This is just from the investor's perspective. I mean, from my perspective, I'm deeply grateful that I have those amazing advisors because then they can share like their wisdom with
Yeah.
me, which is the most important part. But I think that, knowing this bias about, okay, I need to have a team around myself. I decided to, again, like cold email people from LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm working on this company. I'm looking for advisors. Like, would you be open to have a chat? And, again, like it was more like pitching those individuals and, pitching the idea. I think that for advisors in general, it's more of a win-win situation in the sense that they get equity. So, of course, like I don't have any money to pay them like in cash, especially with the fee that they would require as like very senior advisors. But, if the company grows, they are winning. Worst case scenario, if nothing happens, it's not like they've lost anything. At the end, they decided to invest in the company as well.
Amazing.
So they have like extra equity in the business. But yeah, for sure, it's been extremely helpful for me to have, the former CFO of Joe and the Juice, because this will help me, especially as we grow, to think about like, how do we want to structure like, the company? What are the right metrics to look at? Like, how should we think about like growing and the financing, the expansion? I also have on board like one of the co-founders of Atis that has now stepped down of the business for a couple of years. But again, having this kind of like people with this kind of like caliber and like also, experience when it comes to operations is definitely one of the best things that, could ever happen to me. So definitely I would recommend to people starting any business or fundraising, try to surround yourself with the right people. And it starts with like advisors, but that's also like in your circles. I would say like surround yourself with the right friends or, the right like entrepreneurs and the right people that will like cheer on you as well. This is really important to have, to make sure that, everyone around you has just this positive view and optimistic view of the business is like cheering on you. Like I think as an entrepreneur, you really can't afford to have any kind of like negative thought. It's the most like biased, like optimistic view you need to take. It's on you. So that's why like it's really important to surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah, I fully agree. You need the right energy around
Exactly.
you. 100%. It's so interesting to see that, you also cold reached those people. I thought maybe they came from your like contacts in finance. Okay.
No, it was like completely cold outreach, except from one that was like from mutual introduction. But again, I think you need to, it's really the way I see things is that I really always thought, okay, what do I want? Like, what's the outcome I want? And be really, really clear about that just helps you so much to get to this specific outcome. Because I knew I wanted someone from Joe and the Juice. I know I wanted someone from like more London, like operational side of things, which definitely like helped me because these were the skills that, I was potentially missing as well.
Yeah. Is there something you can share from like an advice or a lesson from, any of them that's really stuck with you from the beginning?
I think one piece of advice I can share was from Connor, one of my investors and the co-founder of Atis, which was to really, as you grow, you will necessarily as a founder, like kind of like step away, let's say from operations and delegate more, but it's still very important to check in with the team in store weekly and like just have like chats with people, even if it's like, 10, 15 minutes, like it makes a whole like different and really helps you to identify if anything is going wrong. So I would say that this is definitely like one of the best pieces of advice I've had, to kind of like stay close to the team and always try to find the time to speak with them and to understand like what's going on in store, because otherwise you don't have any visibility and things can get lost.
Yeah, no, love that. And so there's one part of, your story that I really like, which is actually the location and where you are, because obviously from one part you've built, publicly on TikTok that attracts, your like Pilates girlies, TikTokers, etc. But then your location is in the Royal Exchange, which is literally the back garden of, the Bank of England. And it's kind of where more your like people who go to the office, your finance bros are. So it's very interesting to see the customer paradox that you have, because although you're in the city, you've still attracted those, Pilates girlies. So I'm very interested about kind of how that has happened, especially for your first location.
Okay, something I didn't expect that I discovered is that finance people are also on TikTok.
Yeah.
So that's to me that was news. I was like, I didn't have time to have a TikTok account, but
Yeah.
apparently some people do. So no, I think listen, it's true as you mentioned. Like initially I wanted to open like in like Chelsea or Notting Hill, where I thought that this kind of like wellness Pilates crowd would be, but ultimately at the end of the day, I think those people working in the city, they also have a life on the side, and they are also like, there are a lot of women that are also actually, on the weekend, they also enjoy like doing Pilates. So also why not like during the week? So I think that it's just like wellness is so like omnipresent everywhere that now everyone is kind of like integrating it in their daily lives. And I think that especially for people working long hours, being busy, it's really important to find products that help them like perform to the best of their abilities in a very kind of like easy and convenient way. So I think, and because I was that person working in finance
Fair.
before, I also, understand like where they're coming from and why it's working so well. I think it depends on the crowd. Like during the weekend, we have a lot of people like traveling to Elevate, like from maybe West London and coming to us. And this is more, as you mentioned, the kind of like TikTok girly crowd. But I think it's great that we're able to cater to those audiences. I mean, now we just opened in Selfridges, so it was a week ago, so I'm still
Yeah.
like very curious to see and to understand like the crowd that we're having. But I've already seen customers that we're at the Royal Exchange.
Okay.
And now are coming here telling me, oh, I'm so happy you opened here because now it's so much more convenient for me. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about this second location and being in more, I would say, west/central location for this different type of audience.
We're definitely going to touch upon that, even though it's been a week. But just very quickly on the Royal Exchange one, did you kind of have any second guesses at first because of its location? Did you, I don't know, do something to make sure that, you were confident about that place? Or did you notice any patterns of people walking around?
So again, like I just decided to go with the clicker, like the bouncers have, like yeah, exactly.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I was like just standing there like for an hour during lunch break, like just clicking to
No.
see the amount of people that were passing by. And I just like I lost track of like how many
Wow.
people. I was like, okay, this is like the place I need to be because there is so much footfall. So even if I manage to, get like 0.1% of that footfall, that should work. And I think that's something, when I was doing this in like Chelsea or Notting Hill, it's a much more like weekend trade. So I wasn't sure, that I would get the same amount of like traffic. And the idea for this first site was to do the proof of concept. And to prove the concept, you need to have data, you need to have a lot of footfall, lots of transaction to understand what's going on. So I think that for me, it was a bet. But then, once we opened it, I was like, yeah, that was actually so obvious. It's always easy to say in hindsight. But yeah, I think that it was like the perfect spot because you always have like a continuous like footfall. There was nothing like that around the area. So I thought, yeah, this is my white space. This is where I can try and experiment to see how, people are responding to the product.
I love that. Do you have, if we talk a bit about numbers, do you recall how many smoothies did you sell maybe on day one or like week one versus today?
Yeah, so I can tell you that on the first day, I think we sold around like, yeah, maybe like 40 smoothies or something like that, which, is not bad, but it was, it was the beginning. It was feeling chaotic. And it was still like the first day where I was like still figuring out operations. And, I had friends like coming over to say hi. At the same time, I needed to do smoothies. Like the team was not like fully trained yet. So yeah, I think like, probably somewhere around like, 40 smoothies on the first day. Now, when we are reaching like peak hours during like lunch break, I would say we're selling, like easy, like over a smoothie a minute. So
wow.
Yeah, sometimes like the team is selling, like last week when it was like very sunny, like the team was selling, we did almost like 1K in 1 hour
Wow.
during lunch break. So that's the kind of like numbers we're looking at right now. So definitely not the same scale.
Yeah, no, but that's amazing. Is there a particular drink that has like that's more famous and popular?
I would say that the most popular one is the Glow, which is like the pink smoothie, probably because, the strawberry smoothie is kind of like a classic in terms of flavor. It caters to literally everyone. And I think it's also very Instagrammable. But the second favorite is the Lean Berries, which is a protein shake. And this one, I think, it's quite interesting that they are like side to side and it's like a protein shake. I think that it also shows like the demand for more like, convenient option when it comes to like supplementation and having like protein drinks like available on the go.
I actually had the Glow yesterday.
Oh, nice.
I love it. Amazing. And so let's maybe, shift west a bit to Selfridges and the opening. How did that, come about? Was it prepared for years? Did you always have that in mind? Did they approach you?
So it was actually made from a mutual like introduction. And so this introduction happened back in October 24. So I was just getting started on the fundraise and I went to attend like a pitch day, which I was not very comfortable in doing because I hate like public speaking and especially when you need to pitch an idea to ask for money. So I just put myself outside of my comfort zone. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pitch at this event. I'm going to feel extremely awkward, cringe, whatever. Let's go. Let's just go for it. And then, we arrived there. We're like maybe I would say 20, 30 entrepreneurs and everything was like recorded. And then they start saying, okay, who wants to pitch first? Crickets in the room, like no one speaks. And then I don't know what happens. I'm like, okay, I'll go for it. And then the second I say, okay, I'll go for it, I was like, what am I doing? Like, hating myself.
Go you.
So I pitched there. Actually didn't get like the money or anything, but actually because I was one of the first one to pitch, right after my pitch, another entrepreneur that had this business inside of Selfridges food hall came to see me and is like, oh, I've listened to your pitch. I think you should definitely meet with Selfridges. Amazing. So I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, amazing. I don't have anything to present them yet, but like, let's meet with them. So I'm extremely grateful for Jamie that did this introduction. Because then I was in conversation with Selfridges since October 24. So it's been like a long process in the sense that, it was like really a relationship that we built around like how we envision Elevate like in the Selfridges food hall, like how would that fit within the brand, the offering. So it definitely like took time, like every good thing, I guess.
Yes,
so it was definitely like something that was long in the making. But yeah, we now, now I think in terms of like opening, we opened the first store like, 10, 11 months ago. So opening Selfridges 10 months after the opening of the first store for me felt like a natural step. It wasn't too rushed. I think it was like the perfect timing. Yeah, I'm very, very grateful about like how things like turned out to be.
That's amazing. And so what are things you maybe took with you from the first opening or like left behind? They were like, okay, I'm not making that mistake again when you were looking at Selfridges opening.
What mistakes? Because, actually I thought it would be easier to open the second store thinking like, okay, we've done this once. And it was like really tough to open the first one in the sense that you're learning everything as you go. But it wasn't like much easier because actually you have a second store to open. And on top of that, you have still the other one that is ongoing and has, like some operations that still needs to be oversight. I think that I would say something, I don't know if, that's not something that was by design for the first store. I just didn't have the money to have someone like supporting me in terms of like operations. I think that, now that we've grown the team and I was able to promote some people internally as well to have like, I would say, to help me more on like the operation side of things. So this is something, I would say like, surrounding myself with the right people always. But for the first one, it wasn't really by design. It was just like, okay, this is what we're working with. So, And then I think, you just learn so much about very, I would say like operational things, like about like things that you need to, just order things very much in advance and kind of like where to source your ingredients and everything to just make sure you're ready. I would say that the only tricky thing with the Selfridges opening is that because it's within Selfridges and they couldn't leave like the corner, like, not trading or like closed for a day. We basically started the works on 7 p.m. on Sunday night. and we open on Monday morning at
Oh
10 a.m.
wow.
So I just like was there from like Sunday afternoon to Monday night because I just like was there continuously. So I would say that it was like definitely intense and maybe more intense than the first one in this sense, because it's not like, I had time to just make sure that all the stock arrived like a week in advance, train the team in store. It was just like everything happening like literally overnight. So obviously, the first day we had like so many issues, like the coffee machine was not delivered. I'm still waiting for it.
Oh really? Wow.
Yeah, like the blenders, like one of the blenders fuses like blew up. So for like
God.
an hour and a half, we didn't have any blenders. Someone from our team was sick. So it's all of the things that you think like could go wrong. Like you put them into like one day, and that was like the opening day. But yeah, we still manage. But yeah, I would say like it gets easier in the sense that you know what pitfalls to avoid, but it's not always like actually easy to do. It's easier in hindsight as always. It's like, oh yeah, sure, I should have done that.
No, 100%. And obviously I know it's very recent that you've opened, but have you already started to notice a bit something, about the customers and the people that pass by, or, just the dynamics of being in Selfridges versus Royal Exchange?
Yeah, I think that in terms of customers, I mean, obviously because we're in Selfridges and it's still like relatively new, it's more this kind of like shopping crowd, tourists, yeah, very much like luxury shopper, or people that just went to Nobu for their Pilates class, or that just went to get a facial like around the corner. So I think it's like definitely interesting. We do have a bit of like office workers coming in, but less than what we currently have at Royal Exchange. But I also keep in mind that it took us a couple of months to ramp up at the Royal Exchange and to really build this kind of like loyal customer base that just like keeps returning, because like a habit formation like takes time. So yeah, but we're already seeing like regular customers and people that discovered us last week and are already returning. So that's definitely something we're really excited about.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so for yourself, how do you split your time now that you have two locations?
So I really want to still like go to both. Obviously, I can't be there at the same time. Luckily, they are not that far, with the central line. 20 minutes, I'm there. But it's still honestly something I'm kind of like navigating and learning on how to best split my time, on also when to come to the store, not because like every time I'm going to the store, it's much difficult for me to also, like actually focus and be in like deep work mode. So I'm still kind of like learning of like when are the best days for me to just like maybe work from home or work from like a coffee and be like, okay, now I'm focused on like the high level strategic type of stuff, versus like coming to the store and obviously helping a bit more on like the operation side of things.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And there's one more point I actually want to touch upon, before even Selfridges. I've seen, you've grown so fast, and in under a year even, you've had a lot of like brands collaborate with you. And I think that's so interesting, because when you're just starting out, it's very hard or daunting to even ask for that. So I'm very curious about how it happened. I've seen you've had like Dr. Jack, you've had like New Face, Humantra, all of those. How did those happen?
So it was actually people reaching out to us, because I was so like heads down on the operations that I didn't really have any time to think about like, okay, I want to do a collab. And I think, working like with like those amazing brands kind of like also helped us to get more visibility and then be approached by other like brands that, ended up like being a huge part of what we do today. And I didn't like forecast any of that in like my business plan. It's not something that, I had in mind, this kind of like event/partnership side of things. But it's definitely something I enjoy doing a lot. I think, consumers today, like they really want to get this wellness experience. And again, I don't think that it stops to like beauty, because like maybe, if you care about beauty and how you look, that it's also come from like what you consume inside. And so I think there's definitely like an overlap. So that's why we've seen a lot of like collaborations with like beauty brands, where that beauty is holistic. It's not like only the makeup you put on your face. If you have like a bad like gut health or anything, or you don't consume enough like nutrients, that you're not gonna look good. So I really think that there's like a natural like overlap, and all the collabs that we've done like I was very lucky to work with these incredible brands. Like it felt really natural, and we always found like a really good angle, and like it really came from like a natural like storytelling place as well.
Which brand partnerships do you feel was the most successful, I guess, for Elevate? And then maybe which one was your favorite, if they're not the same?
I'm trying to think about. Honestly, it would be hard to pick because each of them were like really good to do. I think maybe the one that was like the most successful for Elevate was the one for Dr. David Jack, because we're actually neighbors at the Royal Exchange with the clinic. And you know, I think that being both like founder-led brands and, you know, being like literally like next door and with this aspect of like beauty and wellness, because again, like they treat more about holistic beauty, and like they were launching a mindful facial. So I would say that, you know, that was maybe one of the most successful partnership. But then I couldn't pick, you know, a favorite one, because I always have like a lot of fun like working on like the recipes, like the branding. So yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be able to pick like a favorite one.
No, that's totally fair. I have like, you know, a lot of questions, and I've been having such a great time talking to you, but I unfortunately have to wrap this up. So maybe I will close like with like one final question. You know, now that you're reaching, you know, 1 year of building Elevate, if there's something you could tell yourself when you were still in private equity today, what would it be?
I would tell her, don't be afraid to start. Like, just start now. You can make it perfect later. Don't feel embarrassed about like asking, or, you know, I think we think way too much about like what other would think about ourselves, when, you know, everyone is just actually just thinking about themselves. So that's something that I've kind of like came to realize. And once you kind of like understand that and just like free yourself from like thinking about like what these other people would potentially think, there are so many things that you can do. Like the sky is your limit. So just go for it.
No, 100%. But Julia, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation so much and learning about all those things. And it's amazing to see you in Selfridges now. So congrats on that again. And really, like, this conversation has just shown me that honestly, wellness doesn't really have to live in opposition to ambition. You know, it really is the thing that will probably fuel it, which you're really showing. So
thank you so much for having me, Karen.
Yeah, of course.
You've been listening to The Seat of the Muse, and I'm so grateful you chose to spend this time with me. If something stirred you today, a thought, a feeling, a question, I'd love for you to subscribe and follow on your favorite platform, leave a review, and even share this episode with a friend. Your support truly fuels this space and helps invite more voices to sit down with me. Until next time, stay curious.